Well, today we've heard a lot of words, but it's not just words that we're receiving, and it's not just sacred stories. What is being conveyed in grace to us speaks to something that resonates in the depth of us, this longing toward the greater something that we sense we're a part of. What we heard today and what we'll be hearing all during Holy Week invites us to a terrain that cannot be known just by hearing about it. It's something we have to walk through ourselves day by day. It's something that must be lived and practiced. And this holy terrain is about the possibilities of who we are in God and how to live to realize that. It's about the preciousness of life. Last week at the 9 a.m. service, I was preaching and I had the kids come up on the altar and get blessed and bless each other with fragrant oil to remind them of abundant love. And towards the end, as I was reading a quote, a little one raised her hand and she kept it up for a long time. Now, you never know what's going to happen when you call on a child during a sermon that has a time frame to it. But I thought, I can answer one little question. So I said, do you have a burning question? And she said, yeah, what is life? Just a little question. Well, the time of the sermon was up, so I told her to ask her mommy and daddy. From the mouths of babes. And what indeed is life? And what do we do with it? And what is possible? These are questions for all of us to ask earnestly and from our innocence and from our open hearts and without any preconceived idea that we know the answer to this. This morning and throughout Holy Week, we are immersed in stories about Jesus walking through his last days to his death and resurrection. And running through these stories for us are endless grains of wisdom about how to be fully alive, about how precious each moment of life is, on all the potential of knowing life, knowing God, knowing the truth, freedom, peace, love. So doesn't it seem contradictory that a story that begins about death leads us to the core of truth about life? This contradictory nature of life is one of the gems of wisdom we are given to consider, that life seems full of contrasts and contradictions, and yet we have the capacity to walk through them as Jesus shows us, walking close to God in truth and an aliveness that can encompass all these things. For example, today we read about the excited welcoming of Jesus as he joyously entered Jerusalem, though he himself knew where it was all headed, and maybe others suspected it. Yet there was great joy as the crowd shouted blessings to him, this beloved one whose power and presence were solid and warm, despite what he was facing. And we might consider how God may come riding into our lives on a humble colt. And will we notice and inhabit our full joy and receive that, even in times when there's so much to feel bad about? Maybe there's the joy of a new insight or in overcoming a bad habit. Maybe the joy of, say, in Cleveland, a sunny day with temperatures greater than 20. Maybe we feel Christ in feeling deep compassion for others or in them feeling compassion for us. Or maybe there's the joy of laughter. Or maybe there's just the joy for no reason. But the question is, can we give ourselves fully to moments of joy, even in difficult times, or even when we feel guilty for our joy, when there is so much suffering? It does no good to shut down our joy and stay in near constant worry or anger. It doesn't help anyone. And in fact, the moments of joy connects us to God's presence and bring us strength to offer more to the world. We are able to feel and be present to a large spectrum of emotions and remain grounded in the strength that God gives us. Jesus does this, arrives in Jerusalem in joy, sharing it with others, yet still later he weeps over Jerusalem. Jerusalem itself is a contradiction. The name Jerusalem means city of peace. Yet, of course, it's not always that, even now. And, of course, it is here that Jesus is crucified, betrayed by a friend, and abandoned by other friends who are terrified. Jesus walks in these contradictions while remaining seated in the core of his heart with God, very present. And in this way, he invites us to realize our capacity to do the same, staying close to God and God's peace, and not shutting down to parts of life. And it's enough to know that God is holding us in all of it. We also see the contrast between the fact that, as we heard in Philippians, Jesus, though he was in the form of God, did not regard equality with God as something to be exploited, but emptied and humbled himself. He doesn't flaunt his power or use force through entering the city, or when he was taken away, or in his trial, or in his crucifixion. And his way of being also emphasizes the contrast in life between outward appearances and truth, between oppressive systems and the realm of God, between the way things can seem on the outside and the divine purpose unfolding in unexpected ways. How might we be attentive to being in life as Jesus, not flaunting our knowledge or our strengths for selfish reasons, yet using them, not favoring outer appearances over the truth, and living in patient vigilance for the deeper purposes to guide us. In the Torah, Jerusalem is spoken of as a contact point between heaven and earth, a bridge. Jesus is such a bridge, bringing heavenly truth to earth, not just in words, but in the consistency of his words and actions, even through the horrific conditions of crucifixion. He models the way of living in prayerful closeness to the truth of God that is always being revealed to us, out beyond opposites and seeming contradictions in the vast terrain of truth. And it is in following Christ through the death of who we think we are into new life that we are shown the way to inhabit this precious life given to us more fully in all its possibilities, and by so doing to radiate light in the world, the light of God, the light of love, the light of truth and justice. And what is the point of our faith? Of all these stories during Holy Week, of our precious lives, if we don't do that?